in the room, they bring out that aspect. The aspect of relevance is very important, but reliability, because it is not only your work, it is work that you will present all the way to court. At one point, that information you have used will be referred to in the course of your work. Now, when we look at our content and our procedure, we ask ourselves, this information is it sufficient enough? Sufficiently related to the facts and the data at hand. A product of reliable and legally admissible. So legal admissibility looks at the methods of our work. And I believe that as we come together in the SCFE conference, we are putting our minds together to understand the methods that we are using. Are they compatible? What about the element of the chain of custody? And I know probably for those who could be forensic accountants here on this panel could be able to understand the chain of custody. In other words, we need to be able to provide a proper trace and track of our documents, a proper trace and track of what we have done. If you have touched a piece of evidence, it should be able to explain itself, who used it, what were they touching it for, or why did they ask for it. At every single time you have a chain log. That helps you to build your proper content. For us to testify effectively, our composure. Many times you could be an expert, maybe you're a CPA or you're aspiring, but the way you speak. So I believe that one of the things that we'll take out of here is communication. How do you communicate effectively what you know as an expert? And this only comes when you are exposed. You can never learn how to communicate until you start communicating. So things like moot courts are very good. How do we present ourselves and bring a professional demeanor? Professional demeanor speaks to how do you stand and take oath. Sometimes I've told some people this matter may end up in court, and I'm like, I'm not interested in court. I fear court. I don't want to be near court. But I think when we come together in such conferences, we're trying to learn from experiences here and there. How do we maintain our contact of our eye? How do we speak slowly so that the judge can take notes? Because we are not rattling. We are supposed to speak in a manner that court should be able to understand. But more so, speak strong, speak clear, and speak audibly. You don't have to use a lot of heavy jargon to confuse the room, but you have to be able to bring out that which is in you. Of course, we have a critical role of being ethical, because as an expert, as a professional, your ethical code of conduct requires you to be honest and truth, because you are becoming a person that court will rely upon. Sometimes they call them friends of court. We encourage the use of simple graphs, charts, and visual tools. All these help to clarify. It's not about carrying the figures and the crunch numbers and you throw them into the report. Because these days we're using a lot of software and tools, so they can produce these reports, but also we should be able to produce the visual item of it. If an answer is not known, say, I don't know. You don't have to try to guess, because if you try to guess, you're already demonstrating that you're not proper. We will talk more about cross-examination through the questions that you may pose. But one of the critical things is that if you do not respond, you shouldn't hurry to respond, because you need to think, and before you act, always think and reflect. Remember that you are not the best. You are trying to simply convince court. There is another person on the other side of the dock. So in cross-examination, many times people do not like this part of the game, because you're being opposed. What they are doing, they want to demean the importance of your testimony. They want to look at your credibility. You could be credible, you have all the credentials as a CPA, but your demeanor downplays you. And so we can't do this unless we get exposed. What about your character? Are you inadequate? Are you irrelevant? Maybe at the beginning you are unable to pronounce your name properly. Or maybe you couldn't even specify exactly where you did this work from. So in other words, it's all the way from inception to disposition. We need to try as much as possible to keep an open mind in whatever we are doing. We should not approach a case when we are predetermined. Sometimes I've seen a moment where people feel like, I know this guy did it. Okay, thank you, Diana, for that message. I've seen Diana saying it's now clear. Great. Sometimes, you feel like, I know Jimmy stole this because I know his character. But from the professional aspect, we want to deal with things openly. You want to avoid just simply concluding someone's culpability, but adduce facts that can be able to bring out the facts. Because then you are able to speak into the matter that is before court. The other element we normally encourage is to listen to the questions, because if you don't have proper listening skills, you will actually lose out. If you have not heard clearly, why don't you ask for clarity? We always say the norm of that sometimes you may ask for clarity once. If you ask for clarity 2-3 times, then it appears that you may not actually be confident. What about if you can carefully follow the investigation steps? If you have your file prepared together, you have built procedures and norms, I believe you have specific procedures that you follow in the course of the work that you do. So when we come into this conference, when we come into such engagements, we are only sharing from our wealth of experience and exposure. So what's your responsibility? As an accountant, you need to tell the truth. When we as Rotarians, I stand as Rotarian, we always say of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? So you stand at the theme of telling the truth and trying to report clearly and concise things. The other bit is, in terms of case planning, we should ensure that relevant evidence is identified. If there is critical evidence, why don't you adduce it first rather than presenting it at the end of the tale? Because many times at the beginning, you can catch the eye of the judicial officers. In the conduct of our investigations, if there are any form of questions, pertinent documents, then those should be collected to the fullest. We talk about not leaving anything behind. What we are simply saying is that it's good to sample, but this is where you find the smoking gun. You need to score more there. And of course, at the end of the day, the pain is in writing a report. Writing a report, not writing a story, not writing a narration. Relevant report that brings out the evidence for itself, so that you can be able to bring out proof of the elements. So you cannot go into a fraud investigation even what contravention of the law has happened, what are the ingredients that are therein, and all these things help us to stand. Mustafa, I hope you're looking out. There are some questions that are coming through, which I think I'll respond to at the end, but thank you so much, friends.
Yes.
I'm seeing questions.
Yes. I wanted also to also bring in Olivia so that we can continue from there, so that we can go into question and answer. I want this to be more about experience, and so that members are heard.
Okay, I just picked out some few questions. I could just touch one of them. Should I also mind about my safety after cross-examination in case of whistleblowing?
Just continue and complete so that we can go to questions at once.
Okay, let me try to wind up, then we shall deal with them at the end. All right, thank you so much for that guidance. So we have, of course, one of the critical cases I pulled out, Uganda versus Jimmy Ramafa, and this was a classical case of an accountant, fully trained and equipped with knowledge. But you can see the various offenses that are mentioned here. We talk of the Anti-Corruption Act and related penal code laws. This will be shared with you. I may not delve into the gist of the law therein. So if our evidence is relevant and has weight, we need to ask ourselves, what does weight mean in this instance? So weight simply says we're talking of the source of evidence. How does a witness know what he or she is testifying to? We're talking of whether this evidence is direct or circumstantial. All these things help us. And then the other bit of it is the credibility of our witnesses, the people that we bring into the courtroom. This will be very critical in how we present our acts during the course of testifying. As I come towards the end of this conversation, is our evidence collaborative? What we are simply meaning is that can it connect the dots to what we are talking about? It's not about every piece of information that you pick, but should it collaborate? Do I have statements that can connect the dots? Do I have information that can bring about the credibility of my information? I thank you so much for listening. It was really a snapshot of the various things that we can experience. I now hand over to Mustafa to guide, unless you think we should dive into some of those questions.
Thank you very much, Jimmy. Yes, thank you very much, Jimmy. If there is a virtual appreciation, I think members are doing it. I'm going to ask Olivia to also share a brief presentation preamble to give you a platform to ask questions. So Olivia, if you are ready, you can come in immediately so that we can begin question and answer.
Thank you, Mustafa. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, ICPAU, for allowing us to share. And this is just a sharing of experiences. Like Mustafa has said, I trust we are all experts in our own right. So we're just sharing what we know, and I trust you will share with us. So Mustafa, am I able to share my screen?
You are, you should be.
Can you see?
Fantastic. Yes,
Okay.
It's clear.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'll just continue. I think, Kaguma, you should also become a lawyer. I noticed that you are pretty much delving into the legal aspects of expert witnesses and expert evidence, and thank you for that. So quickly, continuing from where I'm...
Please put it in presentation mode. Olivia,
Okay.
put it in a presentation mode, please. Thank you.
Just hold on a bit. Is it there? Is it there?
Fantastic. Continue.
Okay. So just allow me to give you just a brief introduction. And as lawyers, obviously, we want the law for you. So what is the place of expert evidence? So expert evidence is under the law. The Evidence Act gives us guidance. Generally speaking, is that expert opinions are not generally allowed. However, these are exceptions that the evidence law provides. Opinions of experts becomes an exception to receiving opinion evidence from a witness, and therefore the role of experts is very critical for the courts in determining cases. And then there are instances where you have non-experts, but who also give opinions, for example, on custom. So you find someone giving evidence about a custom, and that may not be an expert per se, but they're giving opinions. But generally, we have had the experts define that all persons who practice a business or profession which enables them possess certain knowledge of a matter at hand and give them experience to be able to give evidence in an expert manner. So you'll find that the courts will look at expert evidence as specialized and systematized knowledge required to prove a matter. So as we are speaking about accountants, it's a specialized profession, and I believe there are different areas that are specialized within the accountancy fields. And when it comes to expert evidence, the different areas require that someone proves their expertise. So cases in which court is not in position to form judgment on its own, that is where expert evidence will be required. And that's the basis for. So for example, if something can be found within the law or there are written reports on a subject, maybe an expert will not be required. But there are areas where the courts cannot form their own judgment without the assistance of experts, and that's where professionals like yourselves would come into play to guide. And I know that many of you, or some of you, have been invited to the courts to give expert evidence, especially regarding accounts, especially in financial disputes. I know that the commercial court has required many matters through the institute to get experts to give opinion evidence on different accounts that have been prepared. And so therefore, it's been recognized that accountants have expertise in certain areas where the courts will need their assistance in making decisions in court cases. So what are the parameters or standards that you should satisfy if you're to provide expert evidence? One of the very key ones, and I think Jimmy talked about it, is the issue of competence. An expert must be competent. And what amounts to competence? Competence comes from one, your qualifications in terms of education, to the experience and expertise in the area that is being a subject matter in court, or in another field where you are pronouncing your expertise. So the area of competence is very key. And you'll find that when we are working with experts as lawyers, even before you delve into the area in dispute, we want to give a background in your professional background in terms of your educational qualifications. What are your areas of specialty and of study, and how long did you do that? Then what is your experience in that area? How long have you practiced? Have you written any books, any papers, any reports? How many times have you appeared as a witness, as an expert witness in such an area? So it's always critical whenever we're talking about experts that you have your qualifications clear, highlighted, and the number of years in that area, and how many times have you interfaced with the subject matter. Very key. And therefore, with that expertise, then it makes you a competent witness and a credible witness in the court. Secondly, you have to look at the element of relevance. I think Haguma talked about it. You might be an expert as an accountant, and we're dealing with yes, you might be an accountant, but the issue in court is not really about accounts. So I will not bring an accountant to testify in that matter. They will not be relevant. They are experts in their own right. So the relevance, I've given an example that usually we have cases where you have issues of accounts in dispute, especially in financial matters where there's a dispute about parties contesting the accounts that have been produced before court to prove certain facts. So usually what the courts will do, courts have said we're not experts in numbers. These are issues for accountants and auditors. So let's refer this matter to the auditors to study these accounts and then be able to give us an expert opinion in terms of what is the actual, the genuine figure that we should go by. So in those circumstances, the accountants become relevant experts, or auditors become relevant experts in that area, and therefore the court will rely on the evidence. So it becomes relevant because the court is determining, let's say, an issue of a loan indebtedness between a bank and its customer, or it's determining a shareholder dispute where shareholders are fighting over their dividends and someone has not been paid what is supposed to be due. So they're asking, let the accountants come in and give us the numbers. Or it could even be issues to do with tax, but the computations have become an issue and you're bringing on your financial experts to now come into computing the numbers of dispute between URA and, let's say, a taxpayer. So you find that the evidence becomes relevant, that expert report becomes relevant for the court then to rely on in determining what is the figure that should be taken and relied on by the court to make its decision. The other that must be met is that the evidence must be complete. Many times we've had expert reports, experts just thrown out of court because the expert did not show the methodology that they adopted in coming up with an opinion. So for example, what was the background in terms of the background to the matter that you're dealing with? What was the methodology? What did you examine? What did you examine? How did you arrive at your findings? And finally, what are your findings? So sometimes you might find that an expert report has not taken us through all those steps, indicating, but maybe it has come to a conclusion without indicating what the methodology was that was adopted, or what documents or materials were reviewed by the expert for the expert to come to the conclusion. So once one of those is missing, no matter your qualifications, no matter the years of experience you've had in the field, no matter the books you've written, no matter the publications, your report will be thrown out for being incomplete, and therefore it's not a report that can be relied upon by the court. And therefore it impacts on the credibility of a witness of that nature, and obviously it would impact on your reputation if you're a credible and reputable person in the field, and then somehow a decision comes out of the courts, which are usually public judgments, and they show that such an expert's report was thrown out because this expert did not demonstrate how they arrived at their opinion. Or like Jimmy said, maybe you came with a biased view. So meaning that you get into the examination without looking at the materials, but because you had a preconceived opinion, and that's the opinion that you put on the report, and you're not able to justify how you arrived at the opinion. So those biases must be put away. An expert must come into examination of the issue with an open mind, rely on the materials presented to them in the examination, be able to show that the opinion has been formed as a result of looking at the materials, using their experience and expertise, and thereby arriving at the conclusion that they've come to. The other aspect that the opinion must be correct and accurate. Now, we have had scenarios where probably you find a report that has mistakes. It might be, I mean, we're all human beings and therefore it's possible to make errors. But unfortunately, when you're an expert, it's expected that you've come to court and you have been very meticulous in doing your work. So it means that if, for example, we have the courts have trusted you to look at accounts and give the actual numbers that the court should rely on. So any mistake in those numbers in your report can be used against you. That means that that report is not correct or is not accurate. Or in terms of what information did you rely on? For example, the contest is about financials between 2020 and 2023. And for example, maybe you relied on documents in 2019, 2018, and your report is producing information that came before the subject matter in the dispute. That report would not be accurate, and therefore the court would assume that you did not even take time as an expert to understand the subject in issue. And as such, if such a report is produced before court, it will be thrown out, no matter your experience, no matter your expertise. Failing to have an accurate or a correct report, correct parties, correct facts can actually cause a report to be thrown out, and therefore the evidence becomes useless. And finally, expert opinion should be comprehensible. Much as experts are known to be technical and very experienced in the fields in which they operate in, it's expected that whenever you're producing a report, yes, you might use your technical language. However, you're producing it for other people. For example, if it's for the court, you're producing it for the judge, you're producing it for the parties themselves, you're producing it for the lawyers who are participating in the case. So it means that much as you're going to use your terminologies, your technical terminologies in defining or discussing the subject at hand, it's very important to also reduce that in a language that is understood by the ordinary person, by a judge who may not need another expert to interpret for them an expert report. So it's very important for that report to be easily understood, notwithstanding the technical terms therein, which can be easily explained and therefore enable all people, including the parties themselves, to understand what the report says and be able to understand if the judge relied on that report, was the judge right? Is it easily understood? And if the public were to read the report or read the judgment which was issued as a result of a report from that expert, would then a person in the public sphere understand how the report findings were arrived at, what the conclusion is, and therefore be able to discern why the decision of the court went the direction it went as a result of such a report. So it's very important that whilst reports are being made, let expertise also come into simplicity. You need to find out merging expertise with simplicity for the purpose of the audience that is receiving the expert report. I just wanted to give a bit of the areas in which we have found that we have required expert evidence. And as you can see from the screen, we have areas in document examination. We have many cases where you have forgeries of signatures, forgeries in the courts where people are alleging, signature forgeries. So you'll find that usually we'll go to handwriting experts or thumbprint examiners to determine whether the person who is alleged to have signed the document actually signed it. Then we have had to also look to information technology experts in matters to do with systems, fraud, or issues to do with the computer system. And you want an expert to come to the court to guide the court. And I think some of your accountants who are knowledgeable in information technology have also been called upon to actually deal with fraud that has been committed on the computer systems, but where numbers are also involved. So in those instances, you need somebody to come to the court and be able to educate the court in terms of how that fraud was done through the software systems and the numbers that were input, maybe things were changed, and then you're able to show the court how the fraud was committed. And then we have accounting forensic audits. I think Jimmy talked about that. We've had cases where they've been accounting frauds, and then the courts have required that a forensic audit be conducted into the matter, and they've asked the accounting forensic auditors then to come in as experts. And at that point, the accounting forensic auditors have to look at the transactions from the onset, whatever transpired from the beginning, study the trends, and then until the end, and be able to come up with a report indicating to the court whether indeed there was fraud committed or not. We've had issues to do with debit and credit card fraud, and there we've worked with card experts, but also we've actually worked with accounting forensic audits, because in those cases we found that there have been fraud transactions on people's accounts, and therefore you want card experts to explain the system, how the fraud can occur on an online interbank system, and therefore how the fraud happened was conducted by the fraudster. But also the accounting forensic audits then come in to now audit the numbers involved in there to come up with the final figure that was actually stolen or defrauded by the fraudsters. And then computer forensic audits have also been very helpful in dealing with computer fraud-related matters. So I just wanted to highlight just a few of those, and I know that there are more. I talked about earlier issues to do with financial accounting matters that have been very common in the commercial court, where the ICPAU actually has been requested to appoint accountants or auditors to assist the court in reviewing accounts and therefore guide them on what the right figures or accounts should look like and what decisions they can make. So I think, Mustafa, in terms of the role and the expectations of expert witnesses, that is what I can say, unless there are questions. That is what I wanted to share.
Thank you very much. Before maybe, can you put off your screen? I thought I could also share. Okay, so I thought I could share some of my own experience before going to court. Of course, we have been involved in so many issues. One of the things where an accountant would be worried about appearing in court is the issue of cross-examination. You are going to be worried of cross-examination if you are not well prepared. Prepared in terms of yourself are a questionable professional, or prepared in terms of you don't understand your facts at hand, against which you are going to court as an expert. So the opposing counsel is going to look at an expert and attack them along many areas. I have identified 5 because of time. One of the areas they are going to challenge you is on credentials. So this could be the court is going to know, or the lawyers are going to know, for a person to be an expert in this field, what are those things which they should have? In Uganda, we know if you have been to court, if you are not a member in good standing of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Uganda, you are likely not to have weight. Even they could ask you to leave court because you may not be an expert on accounting and finance matters if you are not a CPA. But it is not just being a CPA. Now a CPA in good standing, and a CPA who has been practicing for long. So the more you have been a CPA in good standing, that is good. So much that if I am an opposing lawyer and I know you're going to be the expert, I do research on you. I go on your online profiles and things like this. If I am able to point out maybe previous historical disciplinary record on you and you are the expert going to come to court, that could be an issue that I could challenge because I want to water down your quality of the expertise. And you would find that that affects the court. So that affects the decision on the matter, because at the end of the day, when we are doing court conferencing of a case, we are looking at what is the interests of the expert on this matter. So at the end of the day, you may end up wasting everybody's time. People are going to challenge, or the opposing counsel could do challenge about your formal training. Of course, we talked about being a certified public accountant. They could challenge your current position, your area of specialty. For example, if it is evaluation, you have never attended anything to do with evaluation, you are just a basic CPA, somebody is going to challenge that. So you find that your expertise is watered down, and you need to be prepared from that side. So this is why if you work on a given case as an auditor or as a CPA, it is very important at the end of the day, we select who is going to be the best expert to appear in court. You may also be challenged on impartiality by looking at your predominance of the thinking and what you have been publishing and the comments you have been making, both in media or in conferences. And then somebody may bring an issue that maybe you're not the right person to provide expertise to court on the matter at hand. Then, of course, you could be challenged on your current positions. And of course, what I have seen, which is mostly deadly for us professionals, is being challenged on omissions. And this is the most common one, especially, I don't know, my internet was playing tricks. Can you see my screen?
No. It's currently
okay.
off. Okay, now it's coming back. It's okay.
Yes, thank you, Jimmy. So we are saying that you may be challenged on omissions. For example, you do not test for certain things. If we know, depending on the matters which is before court, if we know that that is the basic, and you have not done it, it means you did your homework. So that waters down your title as an expert. Things you didn't review, but we have seen most of the times, many auditors, they are sampling. Now, you see, facts remain facts. You cannot issue a draft report when it comes to facts. And this is some of the most simple things which we find lacking when it comes to issues for court, auditing reports for court, a forensic examiner's report via an auditor's report or an internal auditor's report. And the auditor in mind has got, I can use representation or assumptions or samples, and yet there is no draft fact. So this affects a lot of things in terms of you being an expert. That's why, because we say every detail matters. And so I can also cross-examine on an issue that you didn't get all the information. And if you got all the information, maybe you would have had a different position. So with that, I'm going to open the floor. You are free to post questions in the Q&A, or to raise your unmute and you ask questions. I will ask for guidance from I see my senior John Bosco Ntangara and Ambrose. I don't know whether this is a 2-hour session or 1-hour session, in which case we have 8 minutes. Let us get questions to fly in. Thank you.
CPM staff, we are ending at 4, so it is a 2-hour session.
Members, okay, so we are managing time very well. Okay, members, the floor is open. I'm going to go to the Q&A question section. The first one is, can you share PDFs? Okay, we shall share the PDFs. Richard Ebiru, some bosses, they don't want to repeat questions on their party, so how can we solve such situations? This question is not clear. I don't know whether members on the panel, Olivia and Jimmy, you have understood this question.
Thank you so much, Mustafa. I think what he's talking about, repeating questions to their parties. So how can we solve such situations? I think it's not so clear on my side, unless I am a bit skeptical, but I don't want to be skeptical. Maybe Richard, you could retype that question. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, so I see. Good afternoon. So how long does the court give an accountant to provide the evidence? I will ask Olivia.
Thank you, Mustafa. Well, the time, there's no standard time really. Depends on how the case is going. So it also depends on the bulk of information that the accountant has to look at. So it really will depend. But what will happen, usually the court will indicate the time. So the parties would advise court probably need a month or 2 months for the report to be produced. So it's not standard. You could advise, once you're appointed, even you as an accountant, after having looked at the information for you to review required and what you need to do, then you can inform the court how much time is necessary. But it should also not be too long, because if it's not very complex, for example, you're deemed to know what you're doing, so it shouldn't take you too long. So I hope that addresses your question.
Thank you, Olivia. Maybe this is for the institute. Moses Guao John asks, court have at times asked the certified public accountants of Uganda, the secretariat, to recommend forensic auditors to undertake court assignments. What factors have guided the CPA in selecting who to recommend, given the numbers of forensic auditors available? I think this, we shall state this for the institute. But ideally, you want to make sure that all these forensic accountants are members in good standing of the institute, and they have been demonstrating expertise in the field, and they are involved with the institute ongoing. Personally, I would say I have not maybe ever been recommended by the institute, not because, maybe because I'm not a certified practicing accountant in the institute roster. So the institute will give us some of these responses later in the closing remarks by John Bosco Ntangara. Then kindly provide guidance on detecting and preventing fraud within the organizations, emphasizing staff awareness and the reporting mechanisms. Jimmy.
Just repeat that question. Sorry, I lost track of it.
Brian Bamuite Perez is asking, kindly provide guidance on detecting and preventing fraud within organizations, emphasizing staff awareness and reporting mechanisms. Maybe I would, I'm sorry, Jimmy, but I would recommend members to take interest in the report to the nations, because the report to the nations has elaborate guidance showing effective fraud risk management and the best strategies for managing fraud. You realize that initial detection is through effective whistleblowing at around 47%, followed by internal audit at around 32%. So you find that if an organization just has only internal audit, the chances that they will detect wrongdoing is completely very low. But I will request my colleague Jimmy to add. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think from the looking at the domain we call the PPT, the people, process, and technology, definitely if you're going to deal with the people aspects, that means awareness training is very critical. But in terms of the processes, ensuring that you are compliant with the relevant laws, compliant even with the standards of protecting your infrastructure, to me is very, very, very important. And if we look at the report to the nation it talked about, I was just picking a nugget of it here, and it tells us that actually 85% of fraudsters displayed what we call behavior red flags. So that means keeping your ear on two red flags, industrial psychology, mindset, is very critical, because the fraudsters, from the theory of the constant supply of fraudsters are simply being recycled. So if we are able to pick their behavior red flags, that will be very, very important. Then just one last one is that 6% of the perpetrators had a prior fraud conviction. That means the repeatedness is so low, but there are people who are actually at a latent state of committing of the fraud. Then the aspect of technology, I can't stress it more. Definitely, we can't run away from the world of technology, that we can use anti-fraud detection tools that can also play a critical role. But these tools are only built after you have understood your organizational culture, that then you can deploy them into your infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. I hope Olivia is still with us. And this is for you, Olivia. Are you there, Olivia?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. Thank you for your presentation. Can a person be prosecuted for a professional misconduct in an office if he is not a professional?
Can I hear that question again?
The question that, can a person be prosecuted for a professional misconduct in an office if he is not or she's not a professional?
I think what I can say is professional misconduct and those standards really apply to professionals in an area. So that's why you'll be taken on. However, if you have held out to be a professional, then there are other offenses for which you can be prosecuted. So assuming somebody has held out to be an accountant, but they are not professional accountants, and therefore misled the public and done some work along those lines, they may not be taken on for professional misconduct because the standards of accountants don't directly apply to them. However, they'll be prosecuted for that misrepresentation of fraud that they have misrepresented to the person or to the public, that they are that profession. So there will be a criminal offense that can be prosecuted against them.
Yeah, maybe
Thank you.
If I could dive in, Mustafa. Just
please come in, Jimmy.
Yeah,
yes,
especially sure. The aspect of professional should not be segregated, because from the fraud tree, we talk about occupational fraud. The fact that you take on a profession by value of being educated, you're professional already. So the intention is deemed from knowingly. So that's why the law always brings about knowingly. And you cannot say that because I am not a CPA as yet, I'm not a professional. In the aspect of fraud commission, you had knowledge. So that can also be under occupational fraud. You are actually knowledgeable by virtue of the job that you possess. Thank you.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you very much. So Lutaya Bashir says, kindly let me know who is a CPA in good standing. I think this is a question which the institute can ably answer, but as a CPA myself, I would say I think that has been answered. I don't see it anymore. The institute provides a criteria or conditions for you to be on the list of members. So any member on that list in a given year means that they meet the minimum requirements to be on the list. So you are a member in good standing, unless a subsequent events happen, you are under discipline and you are removed from the list. Thank you. Then there is another question: is in this case, expert witness is supposed to be a CPA. Where does this leave CFEs who are not CPAs? Okay, so certified fraud examiners who are not CPAs can be expert witnesses in the area of their expertise. So we are saying you can be an expert witness, accountant as an expert witness. So you are the accountant. We can have a medical doctor as an expert witness. We have a lawyer who is an expert witness. We have an engineer who is expert witness. So when you profess a given profession and you say you are an expert, by virtue of training, experience, exposure, and so many things that would make independent people say, yes, this person is an expert, including publishing and having peer-reviewed literature, things like that. In any area, including if it is cleaning toilets or managing manholes. So the CFE who is not an accountant may not be an expert accountant on accounting matters, but could be an expert in something else. I hope that clarifies. Thank you. Amidst being challenged, what is the best resolution to maintain being relevant? I give this to Jimmy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Relevance and reliability, it sits mainly on what are you dealing with. If you are dealing with a fraud, say, of loss of funds from an organization, maybe through a project, then you should be able to connect your evidence to that specific project, not the entire budget. You pick out the entire budget, but be specific to that project and be able to dissect it. In data science, we call it the granularity, the detail of it, so that then you become relevant to what court is interested in. Remember, you're not just demonstrating how much you know, but how much you can convince and move court to believe what you are saying.
Maybe I just could also add in terms of challenges to an expert. Is that fine?
Please come on. We are here to share knowledge and experience. Come on, please, Olivia.
I think in addition to what Jimmy has said, I think in terms of challenges, the challenges can come from any direction. Like it could be on ethical grounds, something that happened. For example, it could have been suspended from the institute for misconduct for some years, and then now you're back and they challenge you on that. So depending on whether that your name was cleared, you could come back and explain, in terms of what happened, and then your name was cleared. Therefore, that shouldn't affect your report. A challenge could be in terms of some mistakes in your report or something that, I think Mustafa said earlier, that if there are some omissions in the report. So it depends on whether you can demonstrate that those omissions were due to the fact that you do not have the material with you, and that probably there's additional material that the parties need to avail to you as an expert to review, and therefore, as far as the report is concerned, from what you examined, the report is competent, has no omission. Whatever the party is challenging about is not part of it because the material was not availed to you. So challenges, I think, can come from different directions. But to maintain relevance is to ensure that you're able to give a justifiable explanation to demystify the challenge that has been thrown at you. They could throw at you a challenge about years of experience, and they tell you maybe you've been at this in just 2 years. How can you then confirm that you're an expert? And you talk about the number of cases you've handled or the number of matters you've dealt with in that period of 2 years, which is good enough, even probably could be better than someone who has been in the field for 10 years, but because of the continuing engagement with that area, you can actually stand as an expert. So you should be able to prepare someone, except a cross-examiner coming at you to just discredit you as an expert, just even for small things in terms of your report or your years of experience or qualification, and therefore be able to explain away what it is, unless of course they get you, and for example you proclaim to be a CPA and then you're not really registered with the institute. Obviously I'm not sure what explanation you can give to justify why you proclaim that and then you're not able. There's no proof that you are registered. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I see so many questions, but allow me to, members, invite you to participate in the Fraud Awareness Week beginning 12th November this month, and also to attend the Africa Year-End Certified Fraud Examiner Networking event. It will be in Munyonyo on 16th November, and we would love to have you attend so that you can network and meet so many other members so that we can have a deepened conversation. I see the question which anonymous attendee is asking. You see, one of the biggest questions which they have always asked us, which was the subject of work which we did for, I think, the IGG, the Office of Auditor General, and the Ministry of Finance, the Internal Audit Directorate, was how come in Uganda we have so many accountability institutions, but fraud and corruption risk seems to be continuing? And I think this is the where you're also coming in. How do you detect fraud when management is actively involved? So I will ask Jimmy, since Jimmy has been so much in the PDU, and the anonymous attendees are saying this is common in PDUs. But also I will invite you, because this is not a report I can share, based on that work which was done. If you are in the Office of Auditor General or IG, Inspector of Government, or Minister of Finance, Internal Directorate, you could find some good insights reading that report. Why is fraud and corruption increasing despite Uganda having a lot and several accountability institutions? So Jimmy, please come in on this question. How do you detect fraud when management is active?
A mouthful question, and in terms of why we have many bodies fighting fraud, I think, to me, I think we've noticed that it's a real vice that is biting us, but the institutions are set up by the political power, and most of these have been established by even the executive because of the desire to fight fraud. But like I told you, from the routine theory of crime and criminology, there is a suitable target, there's an absent guardian, and there's a motivated offender. So any of us can reflect on where we are positioned. I think for me, what comes out strong is that motivated offender, because probably we are not biting much. And also understanding that the players in the fraud prevention across the whole criminal justice cycle is not only one person. There are various players in this. I think we also need to reflect a lot on our morals, the aspect of our morals, our ethical code of conduct, the entitlement mindsets, which are stronger. I do recall, and I can share this, talking to someone whom I assisted on a matter, and he was surprised. He said, "You mean you did this for free?" I said, "Did I have to pay for this?" So the entitlement mindsets, I think all of us on this call have a critical role, that if today we say we are going to fight and reduce the risk and also reduce the fraud, we can together push it up. But otherwise, it's something that we have to understand that as we continue to even expand the use now of technology, it's also playing a critical role, not only in supporting the fight, but also creating what we call a wider surface area for us to deal with the fraud. That's what I can simply submit, Mustafa. Thank you.
Fantastic. Olivia, any take on that?
On why there are many institutions, I think, like Jimmy has said, fraud has become a cancer, and I must say probably our society has been infected. So I think we need many players, because detection can take a group or team effort. So I think that is why. But what I could encourage is that then these organizations or the different entities that are involved in the fight against fraud and corruption can then synergize such that we do not have silos, people working in silos, and therefore lack of sharing of information. And at the end of the day, the whole aspect of combating and the impact of it is not fair. So I think the team effort is good. The different institutions and groups working together are good. It's a synergy that is required of all of them.
Fantastic. So Fiona Akelo is asking, if the matter in court happened before I assumed the office as an accountant, can I be allowed to testify in court or not? Olivia, you can take that one as well.
It depends what kind of matter. If it's about, let's say, accounts of an institution that and you've taken over that office and you've obviously had an opportunity to go through the information, yes, you can. For as long as you can demonstrate that you have the expertise to review information that existed before you took over the office and are able to show the court that actually you've studied the information and given an opinion based on that information, because sometimes even the experts are not seated in those particular offices. Sometimes they're just given information to study and then they come in and give an opinion. So it's the experience and skills that enable them to be able to discern. The only difference is if it's an offense and maybe the previous accountant had committed an offense. Obviously, if you are not the one in office, then you cannot be taken on as the offender in their place. So I think that's where the criminal responsibility may not be tied to you. Unless obviously you came in office and discovered the fraud and did not unearth it or inform the relevant authorities. So there you can be taken on for either concealment or aiding what it says that they do something, but may not be for the commission itself, but for what your role was at the time you took over the office. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Luanga Mawanda is saying, in case an interviewee refuses to sign the interview notes, is it admissible in court? Jimmy?
Yeah, in case the interview refuses to sign those notes, then I mean they are not willing to give you evidence, especially if these are your witnesses. Then you are not compelling them, unless it's on a matter if they are actually mentioning a statement on oath, or at the end of the day, the signature simply means owning up. So if they are not, then you may have to find other means if that's the only evidence. Remember, it's not only through interviews that you're going to collect evidence. You can collect evidence through other means. Thank you. Unless Olivia wants to add on to that.
And thank you, Jimmy. And this is bringing me to the issue that maybe we need to have an ongoing conversation on things like this, because when you are investigating, I know we do a case conferencing, and in the case conferencing, we are looking at the fraud theory and then looking at the alibi of, for example, the suspects in the case whom we have based on their fraud diamond, how they meet the criteria in that fraud diamond. And so in that, you are able to know for somebody to be interviewed, what is it that you want the interview to achieve? Because as I think, Jimmy, you have rightly said, if I fail to get it through an interview, because the shortcut is a confession. So if I cannot get the person to confess through an interview and they refuse to sign, then maybe I should do something else. But most of the time that comes because the investigation has been handled badly, and now you only think that the interview notes are the only make or break of the case, which is not usually the case if you do an investigation. So I am going to request the Institute maybe in the future, we also organize a session on case conferencing, planning a fraud investigation, so that most of the things that always come late are addressed for a better case management from inception to disposition. Fantastic. So somebody saying, where the staff connivance, how can you detect fraud? I'll give this to Jimmy because I think many people on this call are able to answer this.
Thank you so
Jimmy.
much. I think one of the things is that we are encouraging the use of scientific methods of investigation, because once there is staff connivance, then there is likelihood of suppression of evidence or even destruction or destroying of evidence. Remember, in fraud, you're not only using one approach, like I rightly said, If at all there is connivance, probably you have surveillance cameras in that place. You have what we call logs. I know in the banking sector, they have introduced what we call checkmaker. Checkmaker is the second degree that much as you have made something, you have to again be verified, what we call zero trust. So unless all these have been circumvented, that even the logs have been removed, but along the way, you will always find that there is always a trace. I encourage you to read the book that Evidence Never Lies by Dr. McDowell. Evidence Never Lies by Dr. McDowell. I'll throw out a quote there. So there is always, people will always connive because collusion comes from the aspect of opportunity and means. If opportunity finds means, then there's always collusion. But scientific methods can always help you to unpack even that collusion.
Fantastic. Thank you. Evidence Never Lies by Dr. Mark Jimmy. Dr. Mark who?
Dr. McDowell. Let me just get that quote. I'll throw it up
Fantastic.
shortly.
No worries. Fantastic. That's good. Okay, talk more about fraud detection tools in banking sector. The questions keep coming, and so the questions move. But somebody was asking, talk more about fraud detection in the banking sector, microfinance NGOs, based on your experience. Margaret Naloga, I'm going to refer you to the report to the nations because you see, annually myself I participate in completing the report to the nations. It is a publication which is done, a flagship publication by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, which is done annually. And the latest report is the report to the nations 2022. It shows you the best ways of fraud detection. You are going to detect using, for example, whistleblowing. Uganda has Whistleblowers Protection Act, laws of Uganda. I think that is 2010 or 2011. But globally, whistleblowing, which is well implemented, is the best technique. Then you have analytics, real-time data analytics, and into your systems to be able to see patterns that do not make sense, and then you are able to detect. Then, of course, you have the accounting, the internal auditor, when they're doing their normal routine audits, they can detect. Then you have your own staff who are involved, who are suspicious of the lifestyle of the people they work with. So there are so many ways of fraud detection. The question is, does the organization provide an environment for people to be able to report when they detect, or that reporting is suppressed? Thank you very much. Then they are saying, Jimmy Muhindo is saying, for the issue of having many accountability bodies, yet with increasing corruption and fraud, I do not think the many accountability bodies can counter that. It is an issue of society's moral fabric. We have some accountability bodies manned by the corrupt as well. Okay, that is the comment. Jimmy, you want to say something? Okay, please, sure.
Yeah, I just had put up people to look at. I picked it from, I hope the screen is there. So Herbert McDowell says that physical evidence cannot be intimidated. It doesn't forget. It doesn't get excited at the moment something is happening like people do. It sits there and waits to be detected, preserved, evaluated, and explained. So if we have good detection mechanisms, then we'll get the evidence. If we have preservations, you could detect, but you fail to preserve logs. Sometimes we've done some audits in banks and find maybe the logs were wiped. But now in some organizations, they also have what we call backup logs, maybe in an offshore or in other jurisdiction. But also you have to evaluate. That's where the analysis comes in, analyzing this evidence. And critical of it all, you may detect, preserve, evaluate, but you fail to explain. So you have to be able to answer all these four things. Was it detected? Was it preserved? How was it evaluated? And how best was it explained? I think this answers some of the aspects of not necessarily having to squeeze someone's hand. Like sometimes it happens, you try to squeeze evidence out of someone. You should never try to, because evidence is always sitting to be detected. Thank you.
Okay, so Hudson Sekimpi is asking, when called upon as an expert to conduct a fraud investigation, am I under obligation to interview the suspects? I will give this to Olivia.
First, I think maybe let me just clarify that the whole topic about experts is just about criminal matters. Even in civil justice systems, there's expert evidence. But I think it really depends on whether you want to. You as an expert should be able to see and determine what relevant information you will need to enable you to produce a report. So if you think interviewing the suspect would be relevant, I think you could, but of course, usually you know that suspects might be hostile to you, so you probably need the assistance of police and some court orders to allow you access to them. But if it's about examining certain materials, paperwork, you may not need to examine the suspect, for example, but there are certain circumstances where you might need to speak to the people involved, or the suspect or the victim, for you to better appreciate the background of the area in dispute and what you're being asked on to give expert evidence. So probably then you can make a decision to examine. So it's not a standard. It will depend on the circumstances of the matter you investigate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Olivia. Jimmy, do you want to add something on that?
No, not really. I think she said it. She said it well.
Yes, that is fantastic. Hudson, Hudson needs to understand that there is a difference between taking a statement of a suspect and interviewing the suspect. The biggest challenge I have seen many would-be investigators do is confusing the two. So initially, they meet somebody, they have not got other factors and other facts of the case. They don't have a theory they are trying to prove by an interview. They begin interviewing somebody. So you find that the case is lost because you came at the wrong time to interview somebody. If the first time when I'm going to meet a suspect, I'm getting an account of what they tell me so that I'm able to know this is their statement. This is the reason they are saying they are not part of, they did not commit the crime. So now, once I get that, I lock it in. Then I collect other evidence. So by the time I interview the person, I will need the answer. So meaning that an interview, most of the time, whether you are hostile or not, to a very good investigator, you are actually asking the person if they are innocent, it is good for them. Because there is evidence you see, if they don't provide clarification, then they are going to waste their time being called in court and be subjected to disciplinary hearing, being more suspects than if they did it earlier. So I think going forward, it is very important that we learn how to handle our cases and at what point do you say, well, I'm going to interview a suspect? Because most of the time, myself, I found that it is easier to make an appointment unless if somebody is actually hiding something. Okay, just I wanted to clarify that. Then my question was that how can we investigate enough through the exam? For example, some bosses don't want to repeat. Okay, this one was done. I wish the institute. I wish somebody, Ambrose, you could be removing the question that we have answered to save time. Then courts have at times asked. I think that one was answered. I think many of the questions have been answered.
Mustafa, I see their hands. There are some hands up. Did you attend to those hands?
So sorry. I had not attended
I
to the
see
hands.
Richard Bossa's hand is up, Ahmed Sebugwawo, and Khadija Navaterega. Oh, quite a number. Maybe you could look at those hands.
Okay, fantastic. Let me begin with Hadija Navaterega. Okay, Hadija, I will ask you the Ambrose to unmute you. Thank you, Jimmy.
Welcome.
Yes, Ambrose, may you come in and help unmute so that members can come in?
Yes, Khadija should be able to speak.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hadija, you have the floor. Okay, let us move on to Apollo. Hadija, may you lower your hand, please? Yes, Apollo, Ekelot.
Hello, are you hearing me?
Fantastic.
Yes,
Yes, we can
Apollo,
hear
go
you.
ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. My hand was up for so long and it became tired, but it's okay.
Sorry.
My interest was to respond to the issue of having a flurry of corruption, fighting agencies, and then still corruption is there and fraud and so on. I work out of the country, actually in Geneva, but my first time in this place was shock. I got a cultural shock because of the level of honesty. For example, in the public transport system, the GTPG, no one supervises what you do, but everybody pays. In the groceries, for example, there is also opportunity for self-service. I go, I pick my groceries, my shopping, I go and I pay with my own card and I go. And then when I come back home, even just the traffic humps, for example, when you find there is even a road sign telling people telling people that this is a speed zone. Here you need to reduce your speed, but people don't follow. There are so many things. So I think that as Jimmy said, there is always the issue of a motivated offender here. I think we need this because theft, corruption is a matter of the heart as well. I think we need to deal with this, a societal issue around it. A big contingent, a flurry of organizations just to try and prevent to work and whatever. We are only dealing with a small piece of it. I think we just need to look at the insiders so that we're able to know to deal with this thing, because honestly, if that's why you find things like connivance, that's why you find things like people still cutting corners. There's a big percentage of people who will try out despite the fact that we have all these agencies. So I think for us, the accountants and so on, it's very important for us to lead by the example, because it's a shame some of us actually even go ahead despite all the professionalism. Still our hearts are not clean. So I think we need to be looking at ourselves. It is explained by the morally, a big percentage of what we do against all the rules, against all the preventions and so on. It comes out of our dark hearts. That's just what I wanted to comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Apollo. I see the other person with a hand up is Alan Mwesigwa. Alan, Apollo, please lower your hand and mute. Thank you. Alan? Alan, unmute yourself and ask or make a comment. I'm going to request that we are going to close this call at around 3:30 sharp.
I see.
I hope that's okay. I have something which has come up. Thank you.
I can see Hadija had unmute. Alan, would you please speak? Or okay, the hands have dropped. Maybe. Okay, but
okay,
Mustafa.
fantastic.
Okay, go ahead, whoever was speaking.
Yes, Jimmy. Thank you very much, Jimmy and Olivia. And I think that fraud itself is a wide topic which requires a lot of time. Some of these issues we may not conclude them today, but I think as the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, we are going to, since we have started a partnership with the Institute, we are going to work with the Institute. I was when you go to South Africa, you go to the US, you go to Ethiopia, to work in police, to work in any accountability institution, you must be a certified fraud examiner. And of course, you find members are already CPS. So I will try to request that members, we try to add more into our professional skills and skilling. I want to just briefly show you what SFE entails and why you should come to attend the conference in Munyonyo, because that way you are able to gain very good appreciation of the profession. So SFE is a global organization of professionals fighting fraud. It gives an authority. There is what we call a fraud examinations manual. To become a CFE in good standing, you must pass the certified fraud examination course. And this is around 2,500 pages handbook that examines you in 4 key areas. So the 4 key areas are financial transactions and fraud schemes. So this is like the entire accounting you have studied from the books of original entry. Some of us who did, there are some people who actually do not even up now, because of computing and the accounting systems, appreciate double entry from the basics. So financial transaction fraud schemes helps you to appreciate that. Then you study the law. The law you study, of course, it is based on the American law, legal system, but the SFE requires, that's why it has got established chapters across the world. It recommends that you attend the legal modules in the country in which you practice, so that you are able to understand. So people on the faculty are lawyers. Jimmy himself is one of our faculty members, including myself and so many other professionals. So you are able to learn the nitty-gritties of the legal system in Uganda, including at which point does a case get lost. Because you can lose a case in Uganda at so many stages. So you need to understand those, I would call them black spots, and what do you need to do to make sure that you at least increase your odds of having a very good case. Then it has a huge module. This would be like 500 pages. I would say these are like equivalent of 3 different books of an SCCA exam or a CPA exam. Investigations. So investigations is a discipline, and that's why you have seen when you look, for example, IGG, if you look at the report of the Inspector of Government, 3,000 cases investigated, you will find maybe only 20% got caught, and the ones which are actually prosecuted are maybe 5%. So what is the cause for that? Because somehow, if you are going to have an auditor who is focusing on somehow sampling and assumptions to do an investigation, which requires facts, chain of custody, and all the things which my colleagues have spoken about, you are going to lose a lot in the middle, and then you are going to have a report that is not conclusive. This is why most of the time we are called to reinvestigate matters that have been investigated already. And that, of course, is expensive. It makes everybody doubt the quality of the CPA, because the CPA did the work and then you have to come back and investigate it again. So when you learn some of these things, you become a full package. I know some of you like to talk about full packages. And then finally is fraud prevention and deterrence. So here you learn all the psychology of the fraudster and all these things of the motivated offender, the lack of internal control, and the lack of a good guardian, and then of course how you expose yourself to fraud because you have not put in place proper systems. We know everybody given chance has reasons to commit a crime. We have rationalization. So this is why we have found that in Uganda, many institutions are focusing on removing opportunity by putting so much internal control systems. But how are you going to control somebody who is going to give you to commit a crime because the child is sick at home, and if they don't take the money which is in the till for, because they are repeat cash holders, the kid is likely going to not get treatment. So things like that require, for example, personal financial training. So you'll find that we are spending so much a fortune in preventing fraud, internal control systems, and very little budget at all in training people in personal finance, in teaching morality, in teaching people how to handle family and relationships. Even if people, younger men are marrying, they don't know what takes place. They need a consistent training program at the company, including psychosocial support on how to do things like that. So fraud prevention and deterrence science gives you a deep dive into these things which are scientifically proven to make sure that you learn. So that said, I'm inviting you to really come join us in Munyonyo at the Africa Year End event. You can click right now and you can register. People who are lucky, you can also request to have a talk like this to customize to your own organization. We are doing it for free during the Fraud Awareness Week, which is international, and then you'll be able to learn. So with that, I'm going to hand over to John Bosco Tangare to give closing remarks, and then we can say this call ends. But before that, I will ask you for just final words from Jimmy and Olivia, and then I can hand over to JB. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I think my final words come from, again, the routine theory. As we deal with fraud, let's always understand that there's a suitable target. As economies grow, as we embrace technology, there are suitable targets, and so we cannot stop them. But we need to avoid absent guardians. We are all guardians of this safety to ensure that we create better economies. And then we need to degrade the motivated offender, because offenders will always be motivated if they are not prosecuted enough, or if they notice that we don't have the mechanisms. Otherwise, thank you so much to the Institute of Certified Public Accountants. And for this space, I saw we hit a big number. I'm humbled. Maybe Mustafa, someone asked how much is the cost. This is something you may have to speak about. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jimmy. I will speak about it maybe after Olivia. Olivia, your closing remarks to the members.
Thank you, Mustafa. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, ICPA. Thank you, members, for attending. Mine really is to say that let's work together to combat fraud, to fight it, to eliminate it. We need a multidisciplinary approach. So as different professionals, we need to come together and bring our skills together, enabling the system work. And indeed, like somebody said, I think it needs to go beyond just institutions and professionals, but to the society in terms of our culture, our ethics, our morals. So it begins from right at home. What are we showing our children? How are we motivating them? Are we also bribing? I mean, I've seen that in schools when people are going to campaign, children are giving fellow children sweets to vote for them and not about the competence. So it begins from there. The fraud culture is beginning from right at the grassroots, right from the children. So I think we need to all be proactive in the fight, beginning from our homes, our children, our societies, and together we can. I would live with the quote, rather fail with honor than succeed by fraud. And as a people, let's proceed with honor. Let's fail with honor than succeed with fraud. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you once again. I'll give back to the Institute. Ambrose, do I have the powers to invite John Bosco Tangare, my senior, or please? Thank you. John Bosco, you are to give us closing remarks. Ambrose, do we have John Bosco Tangare, or I see is not okay? I see my senior Derek Nkaja is on the call. Please, Derek, you can give us closing remarks. Thank you. Okay, I don't know what is happening.
Thank you. Technology is happening, and I don't know what is also happening. A big thank you to the panelists for exposing the topic and letting us know our role as accountants when we come to be expert witnesses. We thank you for your dedication. We thank you for your expertise. We thank you for sharing what you have shared. Now, a call to all accountants. Let's embrace the new expertise that is coming before us. Courts have continuously relied on us, and increasingly we are starting to have to see or to foresee a challenge where courts directly ask ICPAU to nominate or to pick an accountant in a specific area. So we request that you sharpen your tools, sharpen your skills, sharpen your expertise, and that brings me to make a call for those who would like to be expert in fraud. Please join the call for the fraud conference and training. We have been sharing it along the way. Make sure that you can be grounded, because we have seen cases that have been lost and caught simply because the expert, who is actually the accountant, missed steps and then you realize the client wasn't served well. So let's be professionals, let's adhere to what we need to do and strive to build a better Uganda. I thank you, and I wish you a nice weekend.
Thank you so much, CEO. Members, we thank you so much for your participation. Let's meet next week for the practical audit workshop. For those of you who are in assurance, and as you also plan to attend the events that has been told to us, actually the events, the week, please ensure you book with CPM Mustafa and the team, the president of the association, and also you plan to attend the event on 17th of November. For more information about that event, please contact Summit Consulting, and or you may contact ICPAU, then you get all the details that you want. Yes, good. Thank you so much, Mustafa. That's what we need. So feel free to move to your respective workstations or tasks. We thank you so much for your participation. And you will go, you go as we will not end the webinar. I would like members who have not taken the details to pick from the screen that has been shared. So thank you so much. I wish you all the best and nice weekend. We meet next week at the practical audit 5. Bye-bye.
Thank you, members. It has been a pleasure and always a pleasure. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.